See, as the saying goes, change your habits, change your life. I'm sure you've heard this saying before. Change your habits, change your life. See, if you've done the first steps, again, I'm going to clarify this part about the levels of transformation. If you've done the first 2 steps, yet you're still not taking action, it's usually because your new action, your new decision, your new action is being interrupted by some existing pattern or some existing habit that you developed that you need to change or you need to break first. See, it's like attempting to build a building when there is already a building there on that plot of land. That old building is getting in the way and you need to work on getting rid of that old building first before you can build a new one. So it's interrupting that kind of process there. And so that's interrupting that. And so sometimes we need to work on our habits and patterns. We need to change that and then suddenly everything will click. That's why this system is built in this way. So habits, patterns. So what do we know about habits and patterns? What does research in the fields of human psychology, neuroscience, performance psychology, positive psychology, human behavior, and habit formation specifically show us about habits and patterns? Well, firstly, we know that most of the things we do each and every day are not things we do consciously. Most of the stuff we do every day are things we do repeatedly. If you think about how you woke up this morning and how you showered or what stuff you did first, what order you did things in, how you got dressed, this or that, what movements you made, things like that, most of the stuff is repeated from the day before. Most of the things we do each day are repeated things. Therefore, they're not new actions, conscious actions, they're habits, they're patterns, which is the reason why habits shape your life. Ultimately, I found that it's your habits that over time have the biggest impact on your life, your success, on your health, your wealth, your relationships, your happiness, not just the one-off things that you do, but the things you do consistently, your habits, your patterns, those are the things that will impact your success the most. And so I really need everyone here to pay super close attention to this next section here. So what else do we know about habits? We know that they follow a habit loop. This is the habit loop, which was popularized largely by Charles Duhigg in his brilliant book, The Power of Habit. Amazing book. See, habits or patterns are nothing more than cue, routine, reward loops that are repeated over and over again, making the process more and more automatic. That's all a habit is. Now, how does this apply to us? Well, every single habit or pattern you currently have or play out in your life has 3 parts to it that you need to address if you want to break a habit or if you want to build a new one. The first one is the cue or the trigger of the habit. The second one is the routine, which is how you perform this habit. And the third one is the reward, which is what you're getting out of it, as well as the fourth part, which is the bit there in the middle, which is the craving and the desire that connects all 3 of the things together. So let me walk you through these 3 pieces individually and in detail, as mastering this is the key to being able to freely break habits and easily build new ones. Okay, so number 1, cue trigger. A cue trigger is your green light. It's your indicator that now is the time to play out this habit. It's your trigger, it's your road sign. And like it or not, every habit or pattern you've ever built or broken, so as every habit you want to build has to have or has had a trigger to it. Also important to note is that there are 2 types of triggers. Internal triggers, just remember this, 2 types of triggers, internal triggers and external triggers. And often they'll work together as you'll learn. For example, the habit of getting and drinking coffee in the morning is usually triggered by cues such as waking up and walking into the kitchen for the first time, or on a normal day, driving past your favorite coffee shop on your way to work, which of course right now, most of them are closed globally. Or an external trigger, that's the preceding action that signals to you, oh, it's time for coffee. It's an external trigger. Or another one, it's an internal trigger, which is that desire, oh, I'm kind of tired, I want to feel more awake. That becomes a trigger to get coffee in the morning. Or another one is when people get asked, hey, do you want something to drink? A lot of people naturally go into this pattern of, yeah, I'll have coffee. So that's another trigger for a lot of people. Or here in Europe, another big one is finishing your meal. I've seen this a lot here in Europe amongst the French, the Spanish, the Italian. Their meals have not 3 courses, they have 4, and coffee is the 4th course. After dessert finishes, everyone almost at restaurants has coffee afterwards as well. So that's a trigger for them as well. Or another example, the common triggers for a habit like smoking are things like getting and feeling stressed. That's a strong internal trigger. Smoking is usually the result of an unconscious desire to get out of stress and get into calm and relaxation. Or seeing other people smoke. So seeing that external trigger can be a trigger for people. Or being asked, hey, do you want a cigarette? Again, most people instinctively, before they can even think about it, say yes, and they'll grab a cigarette. Same with coffee. So those are, of course, just a few examples. Now, here's the really important part that I really want you to get. See, as you can see on this side here, let me ask you this question. What are those smoking kills signs on the front of smoking or cigarette packets supposed to do? To stop people from smoking, right? That was the goal. The unfortunate reality is, though, and I came across this shocking kind of study here, is that those signs actually often have the opposite effect and actually cause people to smoke instead of stop smoking. Kind of shocking, huh? Pretty, and here's why. See, for a long-time smoker, seeing the smoking kills sign on a cigarette with one of those disgusting images causes them nothing but stress. I mean, the cigarette packet is literally telling you that what you're about to do is going to kill you. So yes, that causes a raise in stress in your body. And the challenge is that increased stress is usually a smoker's trigger to smoke. It's an internal trigger, once again. And that usually generates a craving because they see that sign, they start to get stressed, and they get stressed. And so their subconscious mind starts to go, hey, I'm going to smoke so I can calm down. It's really irrational, but that's kind of how it works. And smoking kills signs on cigarette packets actually increase smoking, not decrease them. And again, the reason I'm sharing this is to kind of blow your mind about how irrational human behavior can sometimes be, as well as how equally explainable and understandable it is when we dive deeper, like we're doing in this training here, and looking at the underlying building blocks of behavior and life. And the second reason I'm telling you this is because while this cycle, for example, started with an external trigger, which is smoking kills the sign on a pack of cigarettes, what actually drove the behavior is the internal trigger, which was stress. And often these two types of triggers work together. However, I found that the internal triggers, our emotions, are usually bigger, stronger motivators of behavior for those big long-term habits that we've kind of had or want to develop. And that's what we should start when we're looking to change any habit or pattern. And then with that in mind, let me bring you on to one of the most important. So if there's been amazing material in this course, in this live training so far, what I'm about to show you is probably the most important, or one of the most important slides of the entire presentation, the entire training here, which is this: primary triggers for decisions, actions, habits, patterns, and worldviews. See, as human beings, there are primary triggers that tend to drive most of our decisions, our actions, habits, patterns, behaviors, and worldviews. I want to walk you through these so that you can break sabotaging habits that you want to develop based on these primary triggers, as well as so you can find empowering ways to fulfill these triggers, these needs, and create a life that you love living, that you're fulfilled in, that's joyous, that you're proud of. Okay, so take a look at this slide again, and let me walk you through each of these in detail. So the first one there, you can see top left-hand corner, which is fear and stress, getting out of that and getting into calm, relief, and escape. The first primary trigger we all have is the desire to get out of fear, sadness, stress, when we feel those emotions, and integrate a calm, relief, and at least a sense of escape. And we all have this need. This is a trigger for all of our behaviors. The only difference is that different people have different habits and different patterns that they use, that they formed around this underlying trigger. For example, out of this underlying primary trigger, some people have developed and continue to engage with the habit of smoking, which I'm using repeatedly as an example here. Why? Because when they smoke, they breathe deeper, lungs expand, they smoke the cigarette, and physiologically it helps them get out of stress, at least temporarily, and into a greater sense of calm. The same is true of alcohol for a lot of people. You may have heard the phrase, drink your sorrows away, or drink your sadness away. That's what people are often doing, driven by this underlying primary trigger to get out of sadness, out of stress, and into a greater sense of calm and escape from their troubles. Or eating. When do people absolutely gorge on and overeat chocolate cake? Usually when they feel stressed or unsafe or sad. And chocolate cake, through years of repetition, has become a way to quickly and predictably feel good, an association between chocolate cake and immediate pleasure, as is other fast food and other things like that. On the flip side, some other ways, which are generally regarded as more positive behaviors for meeting the same need, are things like meditation. Meditation also helps you get out of stress and into a greater sense of calm. So does deep diaphragmatic breathing. So does exercise. It helps your heart rate go up. It gets you to breathe deeper. It gets your body moving and lets you release stress. In fact, they did a study, and exercise drastically outperformed taking that antidepressants as a way of getting out of the emotions of depression. One group were given medication. The other group was told to exercise regularly. The group that exercised regularly got much better results, felt much better. So exercise is great for this as well. Or having conversations with your friends. Sometimes nothing beats that. Having conversations with friends or family, talking the stress out, and it's a much better way usually for dealing this. So does saying specific things to yourself and reassuring yourself, developing certain self-talk. All of these behaviors, all of these patterns, all these habits can fulfill the same underlying need to get out of stress and integrated calm. It's just that some people have chosen, and when I say chosen, it's often not conscious. It's more like, it's often more like fallen into these more disempowering ways of doing this and fulfilling this underlying primary trigger. So that's the first one that you see there. The next one is getting out of comfort and boredom and into variety and engagement. This one here is a desire to entertain, to be entertained. We all want to be engaged, not bored. We want the same, we don't want the same old every day. We want variety. And out of this primary trigger, we also develop many habits and patterns to fulfill this. And for some people, it's binge watching shows on Netflix for hours and hours every day. For others, it's going on trips and adventures, perhaps being a daredevil and adrenaline junkie. A lot of drug use also stems out of this underlying belief. People need that high to contrast from their normal routines, their normal mundane routines of life. For others, it's social media, that constant dopamine hit that comes from social media, from likes, comments, notifications. Another big one is gaming. This is a big one in today's world. Those addictive video games on consoles and on phones are addictive. Why? It's because they're a quick, controllable, predictable way for people to get out of boredom and entertainment. Repeated over and over, and people that game, usually that becomes part of their life. They develop an addiction, a social media addiction, a video game kind of bad habit over and over again, and they usually fall into that automatically. As soon as they start feeling bored, what does their brain do? You automatically reach for your phone and you click that app. No conscious thought is required because it's a pattern, and the trigger is that boredom. You're running on autopilot without realizing it. When you start feeling bored, your mind goes, okay, what's going to get me out of this? And gaming is your normal method for this. And so you play out that pattern automatically. On the flip side, learning is a way to fulfill this need. All of the people here on this training, once again, I acknowledge and congratulate you, because learning is a way to fulfill your need to be engaged. How many of you are engaged on this training? Already, you're learning things, new information. It's always different. Each slide is different, new concepts. You're feeling fully emotionally engaged in this experience. Learning is another way to get out of comfort and boredom and into a variety and engagement, and generally a more positive way to do it. So is spending time with people and socializing. Hey, people are amazing, beautiful, and yes, exciting and surprising creatures. You pretty much can't have the same conversation or interaction twice. It's always different. And so sometimes this is the natural response. Or family outings or trips or adventures, even work. For me, my work is a very big way that I fulfill this need in my life. It's always different, always changing, very engaging for me because I've selected it in that way. These are examples of habits that people build. The only difference is which habits we've chosen or falling into to fulfill this primary trigger. Okay, next one here, and this one again hits really home during what we're going through right now, which is the desire to get out of loneliness and isolation and into community and connection. See, like it or not, we are a social species, and studies show happiness comes from social interactions and social connection. And so, of course, this is another big trigger for a lot of habits. Why do we go to social events? Why do we have friends, even pets? Why do people get pets? Part of it was for the entertainment that pets provide. Hey, there's a reason why cat and dog videos and memes are probably the most viewed things on the internet or amongst that. But it's also because pets are like these little creatures filled with infinite love and cuteness. Another one, anyway, the desire to get out of loneliness and isolation is great, and a lot of positive habits come out of this, but it's also can cause a lot of self-sabotage and pain. For example, peer pressure comes out of the same underlying need. And so many people, to get into this desire to fit in, will start smoking or drinking or drugs or even murder someone. I'm sure you've heard about the negative effects that come with peer pressure, which is the underlying, it's to fit in, it's to feel part of a community, and people will do things that are highly irrational because of based on this trigger. It's not like these triggers are good or bad, they're neutral. It's how we fulfill these that matter. That's what matters, and that's what we built here. So that's the third one. Next one, conformity and groupism to a uniqueness and significance. So on one side, we want to belong, we want to fit in. But we also want to stand out. And a lot of behaviors are driven by our desire to be able to get out of conformity and being part of a group and into uniqueness. We want to feel special. And we all want attention. We all do. But we don't get attention by fitting in. You only get attention when you stand out. So we find ways to stand out, to be not like everybody else, but be unique and special. And we all do this. It's just how we do this. Some people do it by building amazing careers and accumulating wealth. Others do it by amassing millions of followers. Others do it by helping more people than anyone else. That's what makes it meaningful for them. Others do it by amazing skills and talents that wow other people. Others do it by acting out. For example, why do kids act out? It's usually because of this. They want to stand out, get attention. Others do it by tearing down other people. Others do it by constantly getting hurt or getting sick or having bad things happen to them. So-called, like, I don't like the expression, but drama queens. As before that, others didn't pay attention to them and they didn't feel special because they were just like everybody else. But now they have bigger problems than everyone else. So they feel unique and they have that attention. They're the star that kind of stands out there. And so that's the next one there. Next one beyond that is the stagnation and decline to growth and progress, getting out of that into that. People want more. That's why we set goals. It's a big trigger for a lot of actions. Every year we set goals to earn more, to help more, to do more, to be more, to experience more. That's because growth is incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. A lot of behavior driven out of this as well, but it also can have negative things as well. On the flip side, you've got number 6 there, which is getting out of complexity and chaos and imbalance and into simplicity and order and balance. And I know this is paradoxical, but we human beings are paradoxical. We want more, but at the same time, we want less. We have the desire for more, but equally as powerful as this. We want to get out of complexity into simplicity, out of chaos and into order at the same time. For example, global trends such as maybe you've heard of minimalism or decluttering, as well as many other things, come from this underlying primary trigger. And so those are 6 internal emotional primary triggers that I've identified that are behind a lot of, if not most, or even all of our recurring habits and behaviors. And this isn't just thinking, science backs this up as well. In my mind, in our minds, in our bodies, we have chemicals and neurotransmitters that kind of mimic these triggers as well. Chemicals such as dopamine or serotonin or oxytocin or endorphins, which you may have heard of. They've gotten a lot of attention on social media and things like that these past few years, these chemicals, which guide us to do certain things as well. For example, when we check our phone, we see and we check a social media notification, dopamine is released in the brain. When we do something, check off the to-do list, dopamine is released, and so on. Now, I don't have time to really get into this in this training, but the point is there's a lot of fascinating science, modern research out there. If you study it, there's a lot we already know about the brain and why we do what we do. Now that we know these primary triggers though, let's get back to the habit loop. So the first part of the cue is the cue trigger, the internal and external ones, the external habits that generate a craving. That's the first part, which connects a trigger to the routine. For example, let's say take a runner who runs in the morning. 9 a.m. may be the cue, the trigger, but it's only powerful because as the habit is repeated for years, that cue automatically generates a strong desire, a craving to go running. It's an automatic conditioned response from your mind, your body, because this habit has been something you've consciously chosen to form in your life. It's like Pavlov and his dogs, Pavlovian conditioning. Our mind anticipates the routine and reward and generates a craving because of that. And so that's the first step and how that connects. The second step is the routine, which is what is the actual habit? What are the steps within it? See, a habit is nothing more than a series of individual steps that we've done over and over again until these steps kind of combine and chunk together to form a greater step, which is the habit or the pattern, which I'll explain in the next concept. The next slide, I'll explain this. But before I do that, let me get into the third part here, which is the reward or the result. The third part is this, which is the first reward that you get, the first result that you get is that you satisfy the craving within itself. And that's often by itself a powerful reward for habits. But then beyond that, if you can create a tangible result that you can attribute back, that helps build a habit further. For example, for a runner, the first reward that a runner gets when they complete their morning run is they satisfy their craving, their desire to run. They feel good by completing this. Dopamine and other pleasure-inducing chemicals are released in the brain and you feel good. The key to habit formation, of course, is to acknowledge ourselves here. And as that helps a lot, we should take a moment and feel good and feel proud when we do these things that bring us to our goal. And then the second reward that comes from a habit like running, for example, is improved health and fitness. And you do this repeatedly, you start to see results, other results besides satisfying the craving, which is the weight losing, going down on the weighing scale, perhaps. You find yourself being able to run longer distances, and so on. And both of these rewards continue to reinforce the pleasure that you link, the pleasure that you associate to running. Running equals pleasure. Done over months and done over years, this becomes automatic. You don't even need to think about it. You just wake up and you're automatically motivated to run. So I told you, you don't have a motivation problem. When you do certain things underneath, motivation becomes automatic when you form these associations and you reinforce them. The runner, you wake up, running is automatic. In fact, at this point, if someone's been running every day, every morning for months or years, it's harder for them to not go running, to get themselves to not go running, than for them to go running. You don't need any willpower. The motivation is automatic and strong. So that's the habit loop, the core of habit formation, the three parts and the craving, desire that links them together. And again, you can see it on the slide there. Now let's take a step back and go into that second part. So the routine, how are habits actually formed? Let me go with this next framework that I created for this system here, which is this. How are habits formed? Take a look at this. See, as I mentioned, a habit or a pattern is nothing more than a series of individual steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, individual steps that you repeat over and over again, and they kind of link and chunk together. For example, think back to the time where you first got into a car to drive, or the first time you got onto a bike, or for example, let's go with the car example. Every step when you first started to drive was a big individual piece, individual step that you consciously had to think about and do. For example, step 1 was get in the car. Step 2, hand on the steering wheel. Foot on the step 3, foot on the accelerator. Foot on the step 4, foot next to the brake. Step 5, turn on the engine. Step 6, get a gear, get out of park, and so on. You go through these steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. See, when we first learn to drive or ride a bike or cook some meal or anything really, at first, these steps are big individual chunks and they require a lot of conscious attention for us to do, for us to be able to do them. But after we do the same thing, same triggers, same steps, same thoughts, same feelings, same actions over and over again in the same order as well, your brain starts to learn this pattern. The brain is learning this habit or this pattern. Now, you can do things quickly with less conscious attention required. One step automatically signals the next, and you do it automatically. You get in the car, you put your hands on the steering wheel, your foot on the pedals at the same time. You get the point. And then you continue to repeat this in your brain, the same neurons fire and wire and fire and wire, and the pattern becomes stronger and more automatic. So you've done it enough times, the same steps, same sequence, that the pattern forms, and it's now more unconscious than it is conscious. Your body knows the pattern better than mind does. For example, let me give this. Have you ever forgotten your password or your ATM pin or something like that for a moment, like your mind goes blank for some reason? But then as soon as your hands kind of hit the keys, your body touches the keypad, you automatically go from letter or letter to number, kind of like on autopilot, and you type your pin or your password in and it's correct. Well, that's kind of an example of how the pattern, the habit, you type those numbers in so many times in the same order that you can do it automatically, and your body knows it better than the mind does. You could literally do it in your sleep, like literally. People could half wake you up at 3 a.m. in the morning. You wouldn't even be fully conscious, but if they gave you a card reader, you could type in your PIN correctly or a password correctly without having to think about it consciously, because your body knows it unconsciously. Anyway, the other thing that happens here is because things become more and more automatic, the whole sequence of events now seems like just one step. This is something we call chunking. The mind chunks and processes this information differently and seems like just one step. Back to the driving example, someone could say drive to the nearby store, and since they've taken that route so many times, they may not even remember like which things they did. They may not remember which roads, which turns, how they got to the store. They just know that they got there, let alone the individual things they did in the car, like the steering wheel, the gears, or the indicators. During that first driving lesson, each one of those things was a big individual step, but now it's all kind of like one big step merged together because we chunk it differently through repetition. You learn through repetition until it becomes more and more automatic. And the same process happens for any habit or pattern you formed, not just physical steps, but also a series of thoughts and feelings and pictures in your head, ideas, and so on, step by step that form the pattern. For example, when someone has a phobia, let's say it's a phobia of spiders, they have this phobia because they're unconsciously playing out a series of steps, not physical steps, but a series of steps in their brain, thoughts, feelings, memories, pictures in the brain, memories that causes them to react in that certain way and therefore produce a phobia of spiders. Or same with trauma as well. Anyway, so now let's take this framework, which you can see up on the slide there. Make sure you take a look at this properly. And let me show you how you can practically apply this into your life, as well as a process, another process that you can use that you're going to be able to do right here, right now in this training to break any habit that you want quickly and easily.